Okay, thank you very much and welcome everybody to the Employment and Staffing Committee. And the first point of business is apologies for absence, and I think we've got a few, haven't we, tonight? We've got...
Sorry, Councillor Bray and Councillor Solman.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So the next item is minutes of the previous meeting. We have two minutes for previous meetings. The first was for the 29th of July, 2025. Do we have any comments on those minutes, please? Pauline.
Reading through them, there were quite a lot of actions from it, and I'm just wondering how we get an update. That was all.
So with regard to the annual pay policy, we've made the updates. I can reshare that report. And I can then pick up the other actions and make sure that they're shared back to this committee.
Yeah, there were just some questions, weren't there?
Yeah.
Stephen.
I can just answer Pauline's point in relation to item 11 on that first set of minutes, which is the recruitment of the interim programme director. That's obviously happened now, and that person is in place and being onboarded, as they say.
Super. Thank you very much. I mean, if anybody's ever in the position that they feel that an answer hasn't been given to a point raised, I mean, obviously, please do come back to us and we'll make sure that you have had answers. So I'd be happy to propose those minutes. And Stephen is seconding. Fantastic. All those in favour of adopting these? Super. And abstaining because you were not there. Fantastic. And that's everybody, isn't it? There's nobody against. Thank you very much. Now, we've got an unusual set of circumstances for the next minutes. It was for a meeting held on the 1st of August. It was a very short meeting about a staffing decision. And the only person present here tonight who was present at that meeting and who can vote on this because Louise was there is Pauline Jorgensen. So are you happy to propose these minutes as correct? Fantastic.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much. And Madeline tells me that I can second them, even though I wasn't there, because I trust that this was an accurate recording of the meeting. So on that basis, is everybody happy to accept the recommendation of Pauline and myself that we adopt those minutes? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry? Yeah.
You can all vote on that.
Yes, my understanding is that we can all vote that we are going to accept the recommendation of the people who have proposed and seconded in these circumstances. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. And I haven't received any public questions, so I assume no public questions. And no town and parish council questions, none of those either. Fantastic. Councillor question time. We don't have any councillor questions. That's great. Okay. So we've got two main items tonight, and they both deal with the issue of equality and equity. I've got quite a long introduction to the first item, which is the gender pay gap report, because there's been quite a lot of discussion about this, and people back in March fed in quite a few ideas and thoughts about the gender pay gap report and the ethnicity pay gap report. So I'm going to introduce this first, and then hand over to Sally for her introduction to this. So we're bringing this report to the Employment and Staffing Committee considerably earlier than we have done in previous years because we wanted to give the councillors more time to be able to look at it and to comment and to ask questions. So this report looks at the pay gaps as at the 31st of March 2025. The gender pay gap report needs by law to be published by the 30th of March 2026. So we also choose as an organisation to publish our ethnicity pay gap data. When this report came to the March Committee, members raised a number of points where they wanted to see further clarifications. We've been on quite a journey as a council, both with this report and with the gender pay gap itself. And most importantly, the gender pay gap is reducing year on year. It's been significantly higher in the past, it's steadily reducing over time. We've seen further change this year, and if you look at the median figure, it's down from 15.7% to 11.6%. So that gender pay gap is significantly narrowing. And that's actually quite unusual to see a jump of that size in the space of a year, because gender pay gaps don't usually change that fast. They reflect wider society and they reflect career choices by individuals. What we can do as a council is to continue to work to provide a fair and supportive working environment for our employees. And ensuring equality of opportunity in recruitment decisions is key to ensuring equitable staff progression. And that in turn will tend to deliver a narrowing of the pay gap over time. So why do we have a gender pay gap in Wokingham? So one thing which I know that everybody here in this committee is aware of, but I want to stress for the record, is that the gender pay gap reflects averages in hourly pay between men and women. We already pay men and women the same when they are doing the same role or they are doing work of equal value, and that's a legal requirement as well as clearly being a moral requirement. And what we do have in Wokingham is higher numbers of women in the lower pay quartiles, which obviously affects the hourly rate of pay. Higher numbers of women in lower pay quartiles proportionate to their numbers in the overall workforce. And conversely, we've got a higher proportion of men in the two upper pay quartiles. And this in turn reflects the roles which we have as a council. We've got a lot of roles in areas such as customer service in libraries, where the pay bands fall in the lower quartiles. We've had a lot of success in creating many of these roles as part-time roles, which makes them attractive to those who have got caring responsibilities, and many of those post holders are female. And conversely, many councils directly employ large numbers of employees in areas with relatively low paid roles, such as refuse collection and housing maintenance. And many of the employees who apply for and who hold those roles are male. Now, Woking Borough Council outsources that work, and this tends to leave us in a place where, compared to other councils, we have proportionately more women than men in lower paid roles. And so while we've had lots of success in employing more women in higher paid roles at WBC, this doesn't balance out the relatively high numbers of women in those lower pay quartiles. So we continue to look at and to learn from best practice in other councils, but this difference in workforce means that we have to be careful about how we compare ourselves directly to other councils. Is it right if I take the questions later? I've seen both you and Stephen have indicated an interest in speaking. So we need to be mindful that some of the gap is due to us offering people work opportunities which are attractive to them. And that brings us back to a point which I made earlier. What we believe is if we continue to progress by offering fair, supportive working environment for our employees and ensuring equity in employment development and recruitment decisions, that is going to, over time, narrow the gender pay gap. So the ethnicity pay gap is far narrower. There's no median pay gap between those who are and who are not part of the global majority. This is affected by a relatively high proportion of global majority employees in higher grade roles, and that pulls the numbers up. And so we're conscious that we still need to monitor the mean figure to see what we can do to close that. So the key action for this year is to expand our quality monitoring processes so that we understand the career progression of underrepresented groups and monitor inclusion in the workplace. And that's going to be key to understanding how we can provide opportunities for women who are in those lower two quartiles in particular and who want to develop their career to be able to do that. The commitment training to eliminate any recruitment bias is a crucial support for that. And it may also be as well that we discover there's more that we can do to, for example, support men who would like to work part-time. And this is about supporting everybody. So WBC will also be starting a women's network, a carers network and a menopause network to understand better how to support these groups in our workforce. So this increased knowledge and understanding is the foundation to looking at how we as a council can continue to improve outcomes for all of our employees. So thank you very much. Is it okay if I maybe hand over to Sally and Sally gives her introduction? I think you wanted to say a few words, didn't you, Sally? And then I can see I've got 2 people who wanted to ask questions already.
Just take the questions.
Just take the questions. Okay, fantastic. Super. I think it was Stephen first and then Pauline and then Rachel.
Well, you'll be very pleased to know I'm not going to be very long because you went on to cover some of the points that I was going to make. That's what happens when you put your hand up early. In your anxiety to get in, you end up being premature. I was glad that you emphasised the point about the structure of the workforce, for how that differs from councils that don't have so many outsourced services. And obviously that is a particularly relevant, as you said, in refuse collection. That does make us, structurally different from quite a few councils. But my question really is about, if I can put it this way, the success of the last year, because we've moved from a position in 2018-19 when I think we also had most of our manual labour sources services outsourced. So I don't think that's changed in that period, but we've moved from something like 20%, over 20% gender pay gap then, to 11.6 or 13.9, depending on how we look at it, 11.6 compared with the UK median of 13.1. And we've seen that significant fall in the course of this 1 year. Is there any obvious explanation for that we might want to highlight? Because it seems a dramatic fall, given the structure of the workforce hasn't changed. What could we attribute this to?
I would say some of it is probably being more accurate with our data and understanding our data. We perhaps haven't been as, we haven't been accepting. I'm not sort of saying it was incorrect, but I think the mean and the median sometimes were, when we've looked back, weren't maybe reported correctly. So I think that's where you will also have seen some changes back in, and that is quite a few years ago. I think the other thing is also some of the practices that perhaps we've now, we're working on. We're endeavouring, even though we have, as I say, traditionally filled roles with females, and as I say, and then we have those that are male that are outsourced, but it's just genuinely, I think, just making sure that females understand that there is higher paid roles that they can move into, and we have seen success in some of that where we're growing our own from that perspective of, I suppose, the being in a lower quartile into an upper quartile, so we are definitely seeing some changes there. I think there's still more that we will endeavour to do with some of the actions that we are taking, but I would say that I think the interrogation of our data now, we actually get the spreadsheets out, we actually look at the spreadsheets and we start to look at where, if something changed, what that impact would actually also have on our workforce. Sally, I don't know if there's other things you would want to add.
No, other than, if you think about our upper pay quartiles, we've seen a lot of career progression for females into those quartiles, looking at service director recruitment, where we've seen internal recruitment being a huge factor in that. So we have had that shift. I think if we're looking at your corporate leadership team, we've got a 50-50 split on male and women on corporate leadership. We're similar at service directors and heads of service. So we're in a really positive place, and a lot of that has now been through natural growth internally. as well. So there is a lot of that positive change in there. And as Louisa said, we are constantly looking at our data, and we've sat and really interrogated that data. I think just to touch on the figures that you can see that were referenced in 2018, they were the mean figures, so it is showing like 20% in places as well. And also, obviously the median is the more accurate figure to report on, because it doesn't allow figures to be skewed as much.
I think other things that we're also working through, and I think it's that offer of development internally as well. So I think that's another thing that through the work that we're doing through the people strategy, and obviously coming back and reporting that back to this committee, obviously from our year one perspective, we'll be able to share some of that information as well. So, yeah.
If I just may come back very quickly with a bit of further comment, I think that's really encouraging, and I think as an organisation, but particularly the HR part of the organisation, can take a lot of credit for addressing this in the way they have. I do think growing people from within the organisation is clearly a factor. That in itself is a reflection of our ability to keep good people in the organisation, which, if you're a council that's perceived to be failing or not a good employer or not supportive, you will lose good people. In fact, we're keeping good people within the organisation is a really positive thing.
Just as a quick sort of statistic, I can say that word with ease, over the last 3 years, we've really tracked our turnover figures as well. So when we joined 2.5–3 years ago, our turnover was around 17%. We're down to 10%. So we've got the turnover levels are reducing. So whilst churn in the organisation is good, we're on a target position where our target is 10 and we were slightly under, we're just slightly over. So it is positive to see that happening as well, that we are able to retain, and then we're not seeing a mass exodus where some other councils will experience that. I think just as an aside, I think to touch on some of the points that Councillor Bishop-Firth made about equal pay versus gender pay. We've done a lot of work, as you'll see from the covering report. We've spoken with the LGA, and the LGA were actually quite helpful in pointing out to us that councils can have a 0 gender pay gap but be in a really difficult position over equal pay claims. So there's a very big city council in the middle of the country, and it's all in the public domain, that has, it has a very small gender pay gap, but it had 6,000 equal pay claims to the value of 760 million. So that is quite significant in terms of being able to say that you could have a 0 pay gap, but you could still have a problem. And there are other councils that are out there now with similar issues. So the work that we've had with the LGA and the peer review has really highlighted some of that and helped us to say that actually we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to others. It's a really good news story that we're bringing it down, and we've got a lot of great work that's going on with the people strategy. In the back of the gender pay, you'll see some actions that talk about our leadership programme, our aspiring managers programme, the recruitment and bias training. That will all be delivered or in transit by the end of this financial year. So that is really positive for us as an organisation as well, to show that commitment to the workforce, who we can't deliver what we do for communities without. So,
indeed, our workforce is vital to everything we do. So thank you for all the efforts that have been put into trying to narrow the pay gap. But I'm very mindful of what you've just said about the Birmingham experience. Very, very revealing. Thank you.
Super, thank you. And, you know, I work within HR, and since Lou and Sally have joined us, I mean, I have seen all of the things that you have brought in, which are making a significant difference. So things like, for example, the self-sourced recruitment. You do a lot within your team, and there are a lot of programmes out there which are improving the life for our employees, and also in some cases, such as self-sourced recruitment, are saving money as well. Fantastic. Super. Thank you. So, Pauline, I think you're next, and then Rachel.
I was just thinking about your issue with the lack of well, basically different categories of people being different sexes because of the way the jobs are structured and the way people are attracted. What we used to do was use job families to try and put the similar jobs that have got similar salaries together to try and get a better mix. So you didn't have, you've got the obvious problem with pilots and cabin crew, and so you could average across different job families. I don't know if it's possible here because I don't know whether you've got any male sort of lower paid workers, if you know what I mean.
Do you want to?
Job families is something we're actively looking at. It is quite common again in councils. My previous councils, it's something that they did use. So if you're looking across the council structure, we will try and group jobs that are of a similar nature into those job families. I suppose the thing for us in terms of the lower pay quartiles, they are those typically female dominated roles. So we do have those active recruitment campaigns. We're constantly looking at how we can attract different sexes into those roles, but it's just, I think, typical of those roles where we have more part-time. Males will probably tend to migrate a little bit more towards it, but I think that one of the statistics in there is about 56% of our part-time workers are accounted for in the lowest quartile and only 11% are actually male, so it is quite a small number of people within that profile.
And I think that's part of then the work that we want to do in our action plan, is how we make sure that that's understood from a flexible working perspective, that those policies are there to encourage people from both sides, from a part-time perspective. And I think we just need to continue to look at how we, I suppose it's difficult in the fact of, I say, you want to make sure that you're also paying fairly, which we always make sure that we're reviewing as well with regard to the different roles that we've got in place. But I think it's just that openness and transparency. We've also had our Voice of the Employee survey, so we've got lots of learning that we're doing from that, from focus groups, etc. So it's just how we feed in all of the quality of information into making sure that we try and bring this figure down even further, because as I say, I think that's our absolute aim, is that's what we want to do genuinely. We're still seeing it progressively reduce, and I think we try every year take on board feedback that we get definitely at these meetings, and I know that we're always looking for learning from others, and we will, as I say, continue to do that.
So the second question is much more detailed. Page 18, you've got 1618 as your number of employees. Yep. Is that heads? Because I was given a figure before of 1463, which has potentially is HCE.
This is we have to, so that, I can explain this. So this is where, with this one, it's everybody on our pay bill, which includes, is it the Foundry College, I think, and it's also casual workers as well. It
includes permanent or fixed term staff, people that are casually engaged, so they are just on an as and when basis in the Foundry College. So that number is higher than our actual head count because it's about people paid on that date.
Does it include us?
No, it wouldn't.
We're on your payroll.
No,
we're not employees, but if it includes everybody on the payroll.
No, it just includes people that are undertaking activity and the council pays for. It doesn't include councillors. Yeah.
So that doesn't logically make any sense. So I understand why it includes everybody on the payroll, because it's the easy way to count it. But if you're starting to extract councillors, you could easily extract other people. So why are you extracting councillors and not other people that are muddying the waters? Is a question, not to be answered now, but just...
Okay. We'll definitely take it back and have a look, but I think it's to do with allowances rather than it being salary. But
It'll mess up the average, that's one thing for sure. We'll be our little low-paid... we're probably breaking all sorts of minimum wage here.
Absolutely, and I was just going to say, while I'm not close enough maybe to the detail of how the report is produced, because obviously that is done by the officers, I know that it is very, very prescribed by government how you report things, and I would absolutely expect that it is written in such a way that it would exclude, for example, councillors, but there will be other people that we are required to include in this report.
So we're including them because we're required to, not just because it's easy. Is that? Okay.
We
So
are
in that case, that's a
required to.
different
It's
question.
not, it's not,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
not
Fine.
for any other reason.
No,
Okay.
it's statutory reporting, so they determine who we include.
Super, thank you very much. And Rachel?
Thank you. So a couple of sort of observations and then a question. So to start with, page 14 in the introduction, I just want to question the wording that we're using there. So the second paragraph on page 14, we're saying factors such as an older workforce can increase the gap along with a higher number of part-time workers also having a higher gap. So to my mind, this is calculated, isn't it, on a per hour basis. So the work done and per, the pay per hour. So I think, personally, rather than appearing to use those as kind of justifications for a gap, the report should be worded more to say we know we need to do more to address the fact that, for example, part-time workers on average are paid less per hour than full-time workers. And I understand you've explained some of the reasons for that, but I think the way it's worded, it almost feels like it's, well, that's okay because they're part-time, That's how it reads a bit, and I know from what you were saying that that's not the case, but I think the way it reads, it comes across like as if, that's okay then sort of thing, but which I know is not what you think. So that was that point. Then looking to page 19. So, obviously, just that I welcome that the gap has reduced, and Steve's described it already as a success. But I think, we do say on that page that the median average for similar councils is 1.6, and and ours is 11.6. Now, I totally understand what you're saying about benchmarking, and I'm not ignoring that it's difficult to benchmark, but that is a big difference between similar councils and ours. So, and I think for me, it's about the kind of analysis and the actions that arise from that I'm really interested in. And there is something of that in the report, but there's not a huge amount. So, and I think Stephen's question sort of highlights this really, because, asking what are the key reasons for the change. And I don't think we've really got there in terms of, it doesn't seem like we really know 100% what the key reasons are. I mean, you talked about data accuracy and a few other things, but to me, I don't think we can really call it a success unless we know that it's the actions we've taken that have directly resulted in some of that change. So it's great that it sounds like the data's a lot more robust, which is really good. But I think the next stage is unless you can correct me, the next stage is more interrogation of that data, which will then lead to more targeted actions. So so if I said to you at the moment, what would be your timescale for I don't know, getting to a single figure gap, for example, and what are the milestones to kind of get there? I don't think that we're in a place where we could start to sort of answer to those questions at the moment. So thank you for the extra work that's been done. It's clearly in a much better place and a much more robust than it was. But to my mind, I would like to see more about what are the clear actions, what are the timescales, and that can only arise from really good analysis of the data. And then the last point was about the mean ethnicity gap. So on page 22, we say a positive pay gap occurs when minority groups earn more on average. So we have a positive mean ethnicity gap, but if you look at the diagram on the top of page 23, that shows that non-black and global majority colleagues are paid more. So I don't think that is correct to say a positive pay gap occurs when minority groups earn more. So I would question whether that is accurate, and I think that was the same in March as well when we looked at it. But we didn't have the diagram back then, so it wasn't as sort of clear. Do you see what I mean? I don't know why the positive gap for gender would mean that women earn less, and a positive gap for ethnicity would mean that minority ethnic colleagues earn more. It doesn't make sense. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know if that's correct.
Yes, so these terms are required by legislation, aren't they? So for the gender pay gap, you are told when you are compiling the report what a positive pay gap is and what a negative pay gap is. And a positive pay gap, when you're looking at a gender pay gap, is, and this is, you know, part of how you instructed to do it, when men are paid more than women, which doesn't sound great, but that is how it is set by government. And I know that there is a standard way of the standard terminology as well for the ethnicity pay gap.
If I could just briefly come back, that it still means that there's still a discrepancy there between that diagram and what we're saying in the text above it.
Need to just,
I'll revisit the other one on page
23. Page 23. So
on the main.
you're right. I mean, just from the point of view of, so yeah, a positive ethnicity pay gap indicates that ethnic minority employees earn more on average than their white counterparts. But what you're saying is the way it's been written here, it's been sort of inverted around the...
So do we have a positive ethnicity pay gap?
So a positive, so if you have a...
Do we have a positive, that's the question. Are we saying we do have a positive ethnicity pay gap?
We did last year, but this year
No,
it's...
and that's what I'm
So
saying.
we have a
wrong.
negative,
Yes.
we have a negative.
No, I think it's zero.
It's zero.
No, for mean, so it says the mean ethnicity pay gap, this is the bottom of page 22, has increased from 5.65% to 5.83%. Is that described as a positive pay gap or a negative pay gap? Because if you look at the diagram, as I say, black and global majority colleagues are earning less.
Yes.
Can I make a suggestion? And that is, I think, that sentence at the start of the bottom paragraph on page 22, I think that should just come out altogether. Because what we've done in this report, which I think is really helpful, is we've taken out a lot of the jargon about positive and negative pay gaps, but we have, I think, maybe retained that sentence there. So I think if we take that out, just take that sentence out altogether, then...
Yeah, then we're just talking about the gap rather than
discussing positive and negative pay gaps within... Yeah, it's become irrelevant because we have reduced the jargon in the rest of the report. Would you be happy with us taking that out?
Taking the mean out.
Taking out the sentence, the first sentence in the last paragraph on page 22, I think that's the one that we're talking about, we're referring to, where we say a positive pay gap occurs when minority groups earn more on average. And I think that sentence needs to come out.
Yeah, it makes sense then.
Yeah, it's a statement which is no longer relevant given some of the changes you've made elsewhere in the report. So if you as the officers are happy, I think we should just remove that sentence, and that just removes something which I think is now causing confusion.
Because actually pay gaps, regardless of which way round they are not positive. They're actually, what we want is equity.
Yes,
so having saying it's a positive pay gap because somebody's paid more than somebody else is not very good terminology anyway.
And the government does have this terminology. It's set government terminology about positive and negative pay gaps. But I think that it is just kind of, it's causing confusion here, and that terminology needs to come out. Yeah.
No, I'm happy to remove it. It should probably be under the median anyway, so I'll remove it from that section completely.
I understand.
I just come back on the other point. My recollection is last year that BAME employees were paid more than non-BAME. Has it switched around this year? Because it looks like it has.
It's gone to zero, from 5.65.
Well, not in the mean ethnicity, not in the mean.
It's the median we need to rely on because it's a more accurate figure.
Well, they're just different. They're not more accurate or less accurate. Two different ways of measuring averages.
Can I ask a question off the back of Pauline's question? And that is, I would imagine that when you look at ethnicity pay gaps, there's probably quite a lot of noise in that data. So with the gender pay gap, I think that moves typically pretty slowly. But I think with ethnicity pay gaps, you might expect to see in many organisations larger changes over time. you know, from one year to the next, because in most organisations in this country, the majority of employees are going to be white. They're not going to be global majority. A small number of global majority employees either joining or leaving an organisation could lead to quite a change in the hourly pay rate of that group over time. Is that fair to say? Yes, or yes, even better, people being promoted. So,
Except we're saying we've got 1233 female and 385 male. So you might find actually it's exactly the same for female to male. In that it looks to me like we've got a massive majority of female people over males. I don't know whether the ratio of female to male is similar to the ratio of white to BAME, but be careful. It may not be right. I don't know, but it may not be right.
no.
Just probably want to reiterate what a few people have said already, actually. So I think it's really great that we've got, sorry, it's close enough, that we've got this in such good time. So thank you for that. And I think listening to you talk about the data, it seems like we have made a lot of efforts to try and dig deeper into what's going on. I would echo what Rachel said. I think that's really important for understanding to then drive the actions. I think it's really crucial. And I think we're right about particularly what Rachel said about the ethnic pay gap, because of the smaller numbers we're looking at, we can see larger changes over time from small numbers of movements. So just to be aware of in terms of understanding our data. I like numbers, so positive and negative means something completely different to me what it means to everybody else, but it's fine. I now understand what you're talking about. Before I was just like, but it's just a sign. But now I get it. I do think there's a few opportunities to just make it read a little bit more clearly, and I've just got 2 or 3 examples. Is that all right? Just on page 13, and there's a couple of places through it, I just think being a little bit more specific about the gender pay gap is the difference in average hourly pay. I think we just need to put that in to be absolutely clear what we're talking about. Similar on page 18, I think we've put a statement that says the gender pay gap reflects the overall average earnings difference, which means something completely different to me. I think it would be better to say the same thing. The gender pay gap reflects the difference in average hourly pay, just being really clear there. Again, you can see that I'm a data person, apologies. So on page 18, a similar thing with the figure. Just for clarity, where you've got the female in orange and in the left and the male in green on the right, if you could just switch the M and the F around so that you can see which side of the...
Yeah, there are 2 tables that when I've gone back through the data, it's mislabeled them as I've pulled it back out. So there is that table and a table at the back that needs changing. So
brilliant. Thanks for that. I think... my other point was Rachel's point that she's already made, so I think that's it really, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Nice point. Okay, fantastic. So the recommendation is that the Employment and Staffing Committee notes the information contained within the report and approves it for publication. And I'm very happy, subject to the changes that we have agreed. Do I need to summarise those, Madeline, the changes that we've agreed? You've got all of those down. That's fantastic. So I propose that. I think Stephen has seconded. All those in favour? Super. Against? And abstaining. So 1 abstention from Rachel. Thank you very much. Okay. So the next point, and you're going to be very happy to hear that I have not got a long speech prepared for this, is a Workforce Equalities Monitoring Report. And I think we did talk earlier about the importance of understanding the makeup of our council staff. And this is what this does, and I think it's very illuminating with some of the statistics here about the makeup of the council. And I really had just one point to make, which is huge thanks to the HR team for all of the work which they have done in encouraging our employees to register information, you know, the demographic information. And I can see that you've had quite some success over the years in encouraging people to let us know about, you know, their race and their other characteristics. And yeah, I can see that Lou wants to speak.
I just really wanted to, I appreciate your thanks, but I also, can I just add the thanks to our staff networks, because our staff networks have also been encouraging our workforce as well. So we've been working in partnership with them, and I think it's just, you know, whilst we encourage it, and absolutely, but the fact that it's coming from a wider group of people, just wanted to make you aware.
Fantastic.
And perhaps I'm sorry if I haven't made you aware of that before, but it's genuinely being driven by all of our staff to make sure that they are sort of putting that data in.
Fantastic. And I think it's another example of the really good work that the staff networks do in supporting us in the work of the council. So thank you very much. Did you want to say some words with this one, Sally, to introduce?
I'm happy to. So it's a statutory report that we have to publish under the to comply with the Equality Act and Public Sector Equality Duty. So again, it's taken it a snapshot in time. So just in terms of that, the data disclosure improvements have increased quite significantly. Again, we've actively worked with 2 of our key staff networks. We've got an ethnically diverse staff network and an LGBTQIA+ staff network who work really hard to try and support us in getting that disclosure. We're also looking at improvements on disclosure, on monitoring information, and further breakdown of categories are going into the system again in this financial year. We're looking at better recruitment processes and things like self-service updates. So when we do annual activities such as our APRs or performance reviews, we really, again, try and engage to make sure that staff are disclosing. So some of the statistics there are contained within the covering report. We've also referenced the gender pay. So we've got these reports along with the pay policy statements, all talking to each other. You will note that the figures in this report are slightly different on a female to male ratio of 75% female, where gender pay does say 76%. That is to do with the Foundry College. So they aren't included in this data. This is about our workforce, not people who are on pay. So that is just something to reference. So we are really interrogating our data to make sure it's all accurate. We still have areas where we do have people that are, I think, a little bit more not wanting to disclose stuff. I think disability being one of those. So we are trying to work again and encourage our networks to grow so that we can show that we are open, we want to support people, and from all across the board, across the workforce. And then we're looking at more enhanced recruitment statistical reporting as well to try and get that. And then tied into the back of some of the activity that's happening that we've referenced within the gender pay, we've got our leadership programme, we've got bias and recruitment training, we've got an aspiring managers programme that will be open across the board, so really try and grow our own, but also making sure that we are supporting people from global and black majority into the workplace to make sure that they can really have that inclusive employment as well. So that's just a summary of the report and where we're at.
Thank you very much. I think Lou first and then Pauline. Oh, was it Stephen? Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. I wasn't looking in your direction. So Stephen, Lou, and then Pauline.
But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to point out that, in fact, first of all, the split between male and female is likely to get more heavily tilted towards female when you look at the profile of our new starters, 80% women, 20% men. So this is moving still farther in the direction of a female-dominated workforce. So what the implications of that will be, I'm not entirely sure, but it's interesting to note. Rachel correctly, I think, earlier on when we were discussing the previous item, pointed out that I was perhaps claiming success where success wasn't entirely justified. But I would say actually getting more robust data is in itself a success, because it's the first stage of being able to move towards that kind of analysis and interrogation that you were talking about. And I think that is a reflection, to some extent at least, of the use of these staff networks that was referred to. And that is, if you like, I think a policy initiative that we can thank our HR colleagues for. So while I take entirely your point about not overclaiming success, I do think there is some success in here that needs to be acknowledged.
You will be shocked to hear that my question is about data. So, well, no, first of all, can I just say it was such a clear report. It was just really, really clear as it was written. It was just really easy to read and really comprehensive from that perspective. So thank you for that. That was a joy to read. When I was looking at some of the percentages, I started to ask some questions. So, for example, page 33, we've got a percentage that 15% of the workforce are from an ethnic minority, but 21% of the leavers are. So I thought, well, that's quite a big difference. And then I thought, it's because the numbers aren't there. It's probably a really small amount of numbers. So that might be, and again, I know this is a prescribed report, but when you're looking at data, it's really important to understand that the N and the percentage so when you're looking at things like that. Otherwise, you start to ask questions. And in a similar vein, tables 3 and 5, where we've got percentage. Let me just have a look. 3 and 5. Yeah. So again, I guess you've got to present this in this table, but you know, a distribution of each of those columns would be so much easier to visually understand than those percentages. And again, a percentage of the so that the ethnic minority group adds up to 100 and the non-ethnic minority group adds up to 100. A distribution of each would make a lot more sense.
It's possibly, I think because we have to input the data into the government, the ONS and the government pages, we can probably look at that in terms of how we are displaying it.
Yeah.
Because in the data sets in the gender pay, I've put data labels on now, so it may be easier to have it in a bar that you can see.
Yeah.
See those. We can certainly have a look at that and see if we can make improvements. The report formats have improved over time, but we are always in a position where we want to learn and change. So absolutely, we will take that on board. And if there's different ways we can display it, we're happy to do that.
Because I think sometimes it would invite less questions because you'd be like, oh, I get that.
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
it's a really great point.
Just one little question as well, just about the Amplify programme that you mentioned. Is that open to anyone with protected characteristics?
It's black and global.
It's specific to
majority.
ethnic minority.
Yeah,
okay.
so Solace run that, and we've got one member of staff. We only get one place per cohort, so we have got somebody on the programme at this moment in time. Next year, Solace have kind of given us 2 places, but we're equally looking through our own Inspiring Leaders programme about how can we incorporate some of the learning from Amplify into some of that internally, so we can deliver something similar at pace. So there are opportunities, again, we've referenced within the reports that we're looking at these actively in this year, and we'll bring a report into committee on the People Strategy update.
Brilliant.
And that will showcase what we're doing to try and get the numbers in an even better position.
Yeah.
But absolutely, it's something we're always looking at, and we are always looking at different ways of delivery of things.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much.
I'm just curious. You said you had a reasonable, significant number of undeclared or undisclosed, whether there's a disability or not. Have you got a clear definition of what disability is?
It's again stuff that we're really looking at the moment. I think it's really hard because obviously you can't force people to disclose, but we are trying to encourage people to. I think there's a nervousness about what we do with the data.
So the question is, are people clear about whether they have a disability or not? Have you got a clear definition of what a disability is? Because I know when you fill in those questionnaires and at the end it says, you know, for quality of this questionnaire, are you disabled or not? Now, I don't think I'm disabled, but I've got asthma. Would somebody else who's got asthma be disabled? What's the definition? Are people not declaring because they're not sure as well? Just a question, really. Are we clear about what disability is and what disability isn't, or is it down to people to decide themselves?
That's a really good question, actually. I would probably say it's probably something we could look at with regard to making sure we are providing that definition. I suppose appreciating from an openness perspective that people can come and talk to us and ask us whether or not it would be things would be classified as a disability. But I think it's something we could probably work with our staff networks and our service level forum representatives, because again, I think through those conversations, and it not always coming from HR or it's coming from colleagues themselves, I think it's something we could definitely have a look at, and perhaps not something we've thought of, to be fair.
I'm not saying that is the problem. I'm just interested. When I'm filling these questionnaires in, I've hesitated a few times, and I wouldn't be surprised if other people had as well. That's all.
I think there is something on the recruitment application form, because it would have a definition under the Equality Act.
Yeah,
so we would reference that as standard on application. But from a staff monitoring internally, we can probably look at what's on the application form and encourage people to do it that way. So, yeah. Yeah,
I was going to say, because exactly that. EI will definitely have that definition. But I think some of it is where it's, I think perhaps where we haven't gathered that data in the past, it's people that have been working for us for a period of time. So again, it's just looking at that disclosure data.
Isn't there such a thing as, there was a definition that was registered disabled? In other words, you had to be able to qualify for reduced charges on things, to be able to qualify for disabled parking space. You would have to be registered disabled. I don't quite know what that means, but it suggests you need to fulfill a legal requirement. Is that not the case any longer?
I think it depends what the question is. I think the benchmark for a disabled parking badge is extremely high. I think the definition on the recruitment website is a bit vague. It's open to interpretation about whether you consider it to be a disability, and I think that will leave people wondering, potentially. I don't know, it may be irrelevant, I'm just interested.
I think
the danger is if lots of people self-declare as disabled who are not legally defined in that way, we skew our figures. It looks as though we're doing incredibly well at employing disabled people, and we cease making an effort to employ
completely agree. I'm not suggesting we have more. I'm suggesting we're more precise about how we define it.
Can I say something? And I can see Lou is desperate to say something as well. But I think what might be useful is if I just talk through kind of like the history of this. So when I first started work back in the 1980s, you're absolutely right, Steve, that there was a category called registered disabled. And employers had particular obligations towards the very small number of people who went out and registered themselves as disabled. And most people didn't want to do that. And in, I think, the 1990s, that categorisation of people was withdrawn. And what typically organisations now do, particularly in recruitment situations, is they say to people, do you consider yourself to have a disability? And it's not perfect, because there are going to be some people who have really quite limiting restrictions on their lives, who actually don't consider themselves to have a disability or choose for various reasons not to disclose that. Whereas there will be other people who maybe have very small limitations on their lives, who will say, yes, I do have a disability. But I think there is also a third category, and that is in employment law. There is a definition of what disabled is, and I'm not going to go through it now because it's quite long and it's quite complex, but actually it would be absolutely impossible for any organisation, I think, to go through and categorise, you know, whether people are disabled or not disabled according to the law, particularly because a lot of the information that you would need to make that decision is quite private and personal to the individual. They may very well not have shared it with the employer. So I think it's a very good question that you've asked there, Pauline. I think we should go away and we should have a look at it to see if there could be any way that we could clarify things. But it may very well be that Lou and Sally come back to us and say that actually, having given it careful consideration, we are going to have to rely, for example, on asking people to let us know if they consider themselves to have a disability. It's not perfect, but I think it's very valuable information. And sorry, Lou, you were desperate to come in there, and I can see Stephen wants to comment as well.
Well, I get it's difficult because with any data, it's what's the purpose of collecting it. So if the purpose of collecting it for this instance is to compare our workforce with the census data, then we use the census definition. But if it's to understand the needs of our workforce, then there might be a different definition. So I think you've got to go back to what are we collecting the data for, and work from there.
That's a good point. Thank you, Lou and Stephen.
First of all, it's slightly embarrassing to discover that my knowledge of disability legislation is 30 years or more out of date, but we'll leave that one aside. But it did occur to me as we were talking, you know, a very big category of people who have a life-changing illness, diabetics. I don't know whether they're represented or would represent themselves as a category of disabled. It would probably depend on the type and nature of the diabetes. Lots of diabetes is easily controlled and does not affect people's lives very much, but there are types of diabetes that are very profound in their impact on people's lives and ability to do things. And I don't know whether that is a good example of a kind of category which is very...
It's a better example than last one,
actually. Yeah. Well, at least I've redeemed myself in that regard. Thank you.
I think the example of people with diabetes is a very, very good one, because it is, you know, a very broad spectrum, and some people absolutely are going to be very much impacted on a day-to-day basis, and with others it's really quite minor, and they control it by diet. Super, Lou.
So just to confirm, I think it's important to state that whilst there is a requirement to collect this data, the requirement to do it is so we can improve things from our perspectives of what improvements can we make for our workforce. So that disclosure with regard to any sort of changes we need to make for that person to make it easier, so adjustments, I think is just something we should be talking about, and just to get that general understanding. Because you say there is a clear definition of a disability in the UK, but it's the what it comes into that category, what doesn't come into that category. And I think it's just from our perspective, for our workforce, and disclosing that information, it's so that we are making the right types of adjustments to allow them to do the job to the best of their ability. And so I think encouraging and having that type of discussion with our workforce is probably a good one. Yeah. And again, I think it's just, again, an action we will definitely look at and make sure that we take forward.
Yeah, we're also a disability confident employer, so we are accredited to that. So it is something that we actively look at all the time to improve, try and get the higher level of accreditation. So we'll take that away and look at the reference. Yeah.
Super, Pauline.
Just to come back on that final point about, I think you're looking at two different things a bit, in that individual reasonable adjustments for disability are very personal and very specific. You're never going to cover that in this sort of thing, because you could have somebody in a wheelchair, you could have somebody who's blind, you could have somebody else who's got some invisible disability you don't even know about. So, you know, each of the individual changes is very different. I think this is about making sure we're treating everybody fairly. But I think a little bit more thought about how you define it would be interesting anyway, and may or may not be useful.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it would definitely be useful to go away and just have a look at the definition and see if it is, we believe it's the best definition. And I think it's Rachel and then Stephen.
thank you. I wanted to ask about the data on page 40 to do with recruitment, specifically the ethnicity data there. So it looks to me as though 58% of applicants for roles are from ethnic minority groups, 43% are shortlisted, and 32% are appointed, which, if I'm reading it correctly, those look like quite stark figures to me. So has some analysis been done of why that's arising, and you know, can you say a bit about the kinds of actions we might be taking to address that, because that they do look quite stark percentages to me.
So the application figure for ethnic minority groups is high. We have improved the way in which you can apply for roles within the council. So we have seen a lot of application from overseas, so people that are trying to come to the UK but don't have the proof of right to work, so they don't have the status, they don't have the eligibility to work in the UK. We are having success in some roles where we are sponsoring people to work within social worker environment where we really struggle. So in certain roles, and the government changed the way in which we can sponsor people earlier in the year, so it is more difficult because the salary threshold did change, but because we've improved our recruitment processes, the amount of applications that you can see that come into the council are really high, but we do have a lot of overseas applicants, and that accounts for a huge proportion of those numbers.
Super, thank you. I think we've got Stephen and then Pauline.
Relieved to know I don't think I need to ask my question.
Very much. Pauline.
My question was a follow-on for that very interesting question. Is this another thing that is defined by government about how you lay it out? Because actually separating out the people who've got no right to work and we've got no ability to sponsor would be a very good idea, so that you don't get the wrong idea from those percentages. Because actually, you know, you end up with all sorts of people applying online to things that can't do the job, and you shouldn't be counting in the figures either.
We have put a filter question onto the ATS, to our applicant tracking system. So when people apply now, there's 2 specific questions about whether or not they have the right to work within the UK. So we should be able to filter that out and include that moving forward. Again, it goes back to, if there's different ways we can display that information, then we're happy to listen to feedback if we want it displayed in a different way. But that's something we've only just turned that on, I think, within the last 12 months, but it's something we should be able to report on.
Thank you.
I do remember we had the same discussion last year. I think, yes, I know when I very first became involved in this, I was asking the same question. So hopefully it's something that's not going to appear quite so stark in future reports. Yes, absolutely, yeah. Do we have any final questions or comments about this report? No? Okay.
Oh, just a final question or comment, which is that I think we would all acknowledge that we're never going to get to the point of truly uncovering all of those people in all of the categories we might want to know about. Self-declaring is not going to uncover all disability. It's not going to cover all questions of gender either. So, necessarily we are striving for a perfection we will never reach.
Yes, I think that's a very true point. And I think, if you look at some of the graphs within this, which show how over time people have disclosed more, it shows that we are certainly moving in the right direction. And actually, if you look at the, back to the beginning of the year chart, 2018, in one case 2017, I'm just looking at the one on page 31, we are seeing that a huge number of people now are prepared to disclose things which less than 10 years ago they weren't prepared to disclose. So I think that's a huge testament to the trust which both the HR team and the staff networks have built up with people over the years to make them feel comfortable to disclose this sensitive information. So thank you very much, and we have a recommendation that the Employment and Staffing Committee approves the Workforce Equalities Monitoring Report so that this can be published as required. And I'm happy to propose that. Stephen has seconded. All those in favour? And that's everybody. Thank you very much. I think that's the end of this evening, except for me to say thank you so much to Lou and to Sally and to all of your teams. Please pass on our thanks. There's a tremendous amount of work has gone into these figures. And thank you also to the staff and networks for the huge contribution that they have made. So thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.